Stumble forward, stumble forward. The 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 stumble.
I'd like to welcome Andrew King to the Stumble Forward. Andrew is a Manotick, Ontario-based visual artist, animator, writer, thinker, and bon vivant. Andrew's Twitter account is one of my favorites, with poignant Gen X musings and a Whiskey Wednesday event, among other things, where he deep dives into the esoteric. I love his artwork for its humor, emotion, heavy design leanings, and echoes of mid-century modern, and to me at least some Tamara Delampika thrown in. He's got a fascinating mind, and I'm pleased to welcome Andrew King. Hi, Andrew King.
How you doing, Hawksley? Thanks for having me.
This is really my honor. I feel like I would like to start close-ish to the beginning. You grew up in Kingston, Ontario. Is that right?
That is correct. Not Kingston, like downtown. About 20 minutes west of Kingston, a little community called Millhaven, Amherst-View. It was actually called Nicholson's Point, which is right on Lake Ontario.
And then we fast forward to when you leave Kingston to go to Ottawa, which is you're studying industrial design. Is that right?
That is correct. You've done your research on me.
I definitely wanted to know a little bit. I mean, your art reveals that there's a fascination with industrial design anyway, but I'm curious. So early on, you had some sense that architecture, design, engineering, industrial design, you had an aptitude for this. Is that true? Like you must have been on to a fascination of buildings and what have you from an early age?
That is correct. So as a kid, like most kids growing up in the 70s and 80s, I fell in love with Star Wars. And the movies are great, but what's most fascinating to me is the design element to the spaceships. They have a unique look, if you will, to the show. And that's because of one guy. His name is Joe Johnson. And Joe Johnson was an industrial designer in California. And Lucas hired Joe Johnson as the concept artist to visualize all the spaceships, weapons, costumes, all that stuff. So when I was like high school, they kind of funnel you in. It's like, okay, pick what you want to do for the rest of your life in grade 13. It's like, what? I don't know. I like to draw. So I like, okay, I want to be like Joe Johnson. So I looked up what he did, and he went to industrial design. And at the time, I was building plastic models of cars and airplanes and whatnot. And I know industrial design also requires modeling. So, okay, I like drawing, I like building models. I guess I'll give it a go. So I applied to Carleton University Industrial Design and got into that, hoping it would lead to either working in the film industry or designing cars. But unfortunately, the one instructor, one of the most talented concept designers I've ever met and had the honor of learning from, they got rid of that element of the course. And it's like, what? This was the best thing here. And now I don't have this mentoring on how to be a good industrial designer. His name was Jacques Ostagui. And if you have a moment, just go to YouTube, type in Jacques Ostagui. I can send you a link. Anyway, he shows you how to draw in a conceptual way. And so from there, I started concept designing, and then it revealed itself to be you're not designing spaceships and cars, you're designing filing cabinets for the federal government. I'm like, nope, not doing it.
That is so you as a kid, because I mean, I'm already going to go circuitous here, and I shouldn't be off-roading this early, but you've off-roaded very early. So as a kid, you were deep diving, like you watched Star Wars and knew who behind the scenes was responsible for the stuff that you were most fascinated with. Is that true? Like you didn't,
Correct.
it wasn't just an opaque thing coming off the screen.
No.
Like me, and then you went and bought those Kenner toys, and then the relationship with Star Wars is more or less done. Like you wanted to know who the hell was responsible for all of this cool design work.
That is correct. And whenever you watch a film and you love the look of it,
Yeah.
whether it's Tron or I don't know, Battlestar Galactica, always look in the credits for the art director. And that guy, that title is the person responsible for the visual look of the film.
Right.
So when I watched Star Wars, I saw Joe Johnson. I'm like, who's this guy? Found out what he did, got all his books, and learned from, I don't want to say copying, but you look and you can analyze how they draw and design and apply it to your own skills. So I saw he used a certain type of marker, he used a certain type of paper, and that began the process of going that guy turned out to be a genius in his own future career. He's now a director, a film director, but his initial start were those little sketches. So yeah, I did everything I could to aspire to what he did.
And how old was he when he was working on Star Wars?
He was hired out of college. He was probably in his late 20s, I would say.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Just out of curiosity, what is your, I mean, when the minute you talk about the design aspects of Star Wars, one of my earliest babysitters had an older son called Alan Stora, and I was like 3 or 4 years old, and I still remember pretending I was Alan Stora because Alan had all the Star Wars stuff, and he was an absolutely astounding sketch artist, drawer, not a sketch artist.
Oh wow, cool. Yeah, yeah.
His room
Yeah.
was full of Star Wars drawings, and it was almost like he blueprint type drawings. I can picture it as if it was yesterday. But I wanted to be Alan Stora, and I wanted to have his ability to draw Star Wars stuff. I mean, you are right that it's a compelling collection of design concepts. Like for me, how many times did I build Han Solo's gun in Lego? Like over and over and over again. There's something about
Right.
the way that gun looks that it's a very appealing shape. There's something there was something about there was a ruddiness to everything that I think was also happening in Star Wars. Everything was had a little bit of rust on it, I think, in Star Wars, which made it that much more believable.
Yeah, that was the vision of George Lucas. So up to that point, most of the sci-fi world was like slick and clean and everything is very shiny. But George envisioned a world that was more beat up and I guess because at that time there was the Galactic Empire. We are super nerding out here.
I love it.
The Galactic Empire and the Rebels. So this is a warring universe we're in.
Yep.
So you're not going to have pristine vehicles. The Rebels were just using random ships that they fixed up and are probably super old, and that's why they're all run down looking. But meanwhile, Darth Vader's ship, that's pristine. But the Rebels and Mos Eisley, it's all run down and kind of weathered. And that was George's vision. And it was up to Joe Johnson to take that vision and visualize it. So again, that was not a big budget film when it was made. So a lot of the props had to use repurposed props from old war movies. So Han Solo's gun is a World War I Mauser that they just put a scope on it, put some nuts and bolts on it to make it look futuristic. The stormtroopers' laser guns are actually World War II British machine guns. Like they just haphazardly made stuff out of existing technology, which makes it seem real because it is real with a little slight twist. And that's, if we're fully nerding out, that was the failure of the new films. Now they have big budgets and they can do whatever they want, and they kind of ruined the aesthetic in the new films because of that. I forget who said it. There's a quote about the necessity of invention.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so they were just throwing together what they could within their budget, within their timeline. And I think that's what brings out the best in a designer, is having to strive for excellence with limited means. And it makes you think outside the box, etc. Anyway.
Man, Andrew, you're talking my language. And in fact, my first record, I felt like I kept a distant sort of like connection to the idea of the hand-built nature of Star Wars. And that I've always believed from a conceptual point of view that as we've moved into the 21st century, I think we are beguiled by this idea that limitlessness is going to be the answer. And I think limitlessness is dangerous to humans. I don't know if we understand completely what to do with it. And when challenged with extreme limitation, that's when humans really rise to the challenge of invention, like what you're saying. Let's quickly let I could talk about this, and in fact, I've always thought that you should be a regular on this show, and it's clearly you should be a regular on this show.
Well, I am super pumped to be just chatting with you.
Yeah,
So,
same.
I haven't seen you in a while, but I've been following your exploits. You've been around the country, awesome. And it's cool to know we're on the same wavelength and I can watch your success and going around. And then we come back here and we can pick up where we left off. And I tell Allie this all the time. You could probably relate. I call them sandbox friends. So sandbox friends are people, if you were like 7 years old in the sandbox and some random kid comes up with their Hot Wheels or GI Joes, whatever, you get along with them in that sandbox and then you never see them again, and then they show up weeks later in the sandbox, and I call them my sandbox friends. So welcome to the sandbox.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate that. I can completely understand what it is you're saying. Let's talk about your art because I love your art, and I'm a fan of visual art and visual artists. My mom is a visual artist, and you are ensconced in a life and a process that is long and dedicated and thoughtful. And your work does have all that design stuff like we were talking about. There's humor in there. We've already, in the first few minutes of just talking to you, here your ebullience, you are funny, you are thoughtful, you are effervescent, you have a youthful spirit that is fascinating. So your art, you paint pictures of flying churches and flying buildings and flying people, and some of these buildings are not flying, and some of these
Right.
that's the Tamara Delempica thing to me is some of the futuristic car designs as dreamt up from the mid 1920s. You have a natural humor, and it seems like as an artist, you are naturally who you are. I don't look at Andrew King's paintings and go, oh, Andrew King is trying to be somebody. I feel Andrew King is uniquely Andrew King. Now, I don't know all the art that's been made in the world, but when I look at your stuff, it speaks to me uniquely, and I feel like I've never seen anything quite like it. So I'll hand it over to you to speak to all of that from this point on.
Sure.
Go.
Well, thank you. Myself, like many artists, we are inspired by other artists and other artwork. Same for me. And I think what most artists do is just take elements of their favorite artists and techniques and you blend it into your own work, which I do. So for me, I was working in television animation, and it's up and down. It's like you're working intensely for months and then you're out of work for months. So I'm like, what am I going to do in my time off? So I got this book for my birthday from my dad called Bruce McCall's I forget it's a weird wacky title, like Wacky Sunday Breakfast or something. And I'm like, this is amazing. And Bruce McCall, again, I looked into his background, and he was a an industrial designer who designed cars for GM, Chrysler. This is back in the 40s and 50s. And then he became a graphic designer, and you probably have seen his stuff on the cover of New Yorker magazine. So the New Yorker uses a lot of artists' artwork on their covers. And so they must have contracted Bruce McCall, I'd say 100 times to do a cover. And he did this book all on his own about random, ridiculous Art Deco buildings. So he would take the extreme. So let's say he loved designing cars. So he's like, the new Chrysler. And it would be like 100 feet long with a 400 horsepower. Like, it was ridiculous, but it was so well done. I'm like, this guy blends art and humor in a package deal that I like. I'm going to try doing it. And I'm not going to say, again, copy it, but take elements like, oh, I really like how he did that sky. or I really like how he did the reflection of the chrome on that car. And so Bruce McCall, and then you've got people like Edward Hopper. Edward Hopper did Nighthawks, that famous painting of people having a coffee at midnight in a diner,
Yeah.
and the guy's wearing a fedora. I really liked Edward Hopper. Um, anyway, and just taking all these elements and blending it into my own stuff. And I think as an artist, you just got to do what you like to do. And I find so many artists are asking, "Oh, how do you do it?" I'm like, I don't know. I paint what I like, and of course, you can't paint. Oh, I can't paint X-wing and Tie fighters all the time. No one's gonna buy that. So I do my own stuff for my own fun, and I don't care if it sells. But I also have to be mindful of like, okay, no one's gonna want a 4 foot painting of I don't know, a Corvette Stingray. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. So I try and paint a bit of both that's appealing to a large number, but then do very specific. If you've been following my shows, you've seen that I've done like 80s malls. Um, right now I'm doing a little village down the road called North Gore. And part of the fun of painting is, for me, researching things and getting them accurate. So for North Gore, I'm really enjoying learning the history of each of the houses that I'm painting. And that lends itself to having some authenticity behind the, it's not just something I made up in my head, which I do all the time. But for this particular show, I wanted to nail down all the history accurately for each of these homes. So if somebody's driving by, they'll go, "Oh, I remember that house. He painted that, and it used to be a barber shop, whatever."
Mhm.
Because I think history is also important, uh, to respect our past. And so many of these old buildings get demolished, and they have such a cool history that is forgotten. So in my own nerdy way, I'm trying to paint them, but also bring the history alive to them before they're gone.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we could do a whole separate episode on your fascination with older buildings. In fact, just looking at your Twitter today, I know that is it the Embassy West in Ottawa is being demolished, and
Oh my God. Yeah.
I believe I
Yeah.
had the best peanut butter and banana sandwiches there in like 1982 with my family when we
That's hilarious.
have a tourist outing in Ottawa, and I remember
Yep.
peanut butter being so thick on the sandwich, it stuck to the roof of my mouth, and it was just so fabulous. Um, so I say we could go there, and we will shortly, I believe. But I would
Yes.
like
Okay.
just quickly because when my wife and I, Jenny, when we were first together, like it's no secret that I'm a singer arty type dude, and Jenny, I was inviting her to sort of become passionate about visual art in the way that I was. And when we're traveling, we like to buy stuff where we are. And it's a wonderful
Cool.
sort of hand created reminder of, and a very evocative thing to bring home from where it, but you know, for us, when you see a painting, you have to like live with it for a while. I usually don't buy a painting day one. I go to sleep. And then if I wake up thinking about the painting, it must be bought. So, but early on, Jenny was like, well, so how do you even appreciate art? Because art is often sold as this very uppity modality where you have to be educated in order to appreciate it, which you and I both know is a total fallacy. Your art speaks to my gut because of the authenticity you put in it from the get-go. But I said to Jenny early on, with visual art, the first thing I approach visual art with is that somebody decided to do it. Like there's a lot of things you could do in the day that are easier than making a painting. And like making a painting to me, as a guy who makes pop songs, like I can see to the end of a pop song in 20 minutes or a half an hour. With a painting, you have to stick with it for a long time. You have to have a relationship with that canvas, at least from what I gather. You're in a relationship with what you do for a very long time. And once it's done, I mean, you could choose to reproduce it, but you've created a thing that can only be sold once. So you spend a lot of time with this item that is only going to end up in some ways being enjoyed by one person in their home. So I am fascinated by this process, and I guess I'm interested because we can all, just by listening to you, hear what an erudite creature you are. I can't even figure out sometimes how the hell Andrew King's able to compartmentalize his day so that he can get his reading done, get his research done, get his painting done. Can you paint the picture of what a dedicated, artful sort of day looks like for you when you're working towards a show, the kind of hours, the kind of headspace you
Sure.
be in, and that
Yep.
general attitude about, the work ethic around creating what it is you're doing? Because it just doesn't happen by accident.
Sure. Yeah, and I get asked that question often by budding artists because never in a million years did I think in high school when you're in the guidance counselor's office deciding your fate that I'd be painting, right?
Right.
And like I love the name of your podcast, The Stumble Forward. And that's such a great analogy for life. You're stumbling forward, not knowing what's going to happen next. So I always tell people, like, let the art find you. Don't try too hard to find the art. Like, you will be inspired by something and go with that. For me, I'm inspired by architecture, history, and just the general cool lighting of nature. We are blessed on planet Earth with incredible light. And I don't know what makes people every doesn't matter if you're from Los Angeles or Halifax, everyone loves a nice sunset.
Mm.
And there's something about the colors and the light. Anyway, it's appealing to all humans, I would think. And so I try and find pleasing colors that I think most people would like in a color palette. And then in terms of making that into an art show, I also tell people, like, the actual physical dabbing your paintbrush and painting is 50% of your annual work. The other 50% is buying supplies, preparing the canvas, cleaning your studio, researching and prepping and planning every painting. So I think there's a misconception of being an artist is you're wearing a beret. Oh, thanks, Sally. Uh, wearing a beret and having a glass of wine and a striped shirt, and you're like, and you're painting. No, that's not it. Maybe if you have nothing better to do, but I got to pay some bills here. So I treat this as a business, uh, and fun. So I'm like yourself, you probably wake up and go, wow, I'm going to do something I actually like doing today. But it's not all fun and games. I have to sit down and plan out my day so I can maximize my, I guess, what would you call it? Maximize your talent and your efforts. So it produces something. So I always tell, there are days I wake up and I'm sure Sam, you're like, I'm not inspired to do anything but sit on the couch and read a comic book or whatever. But you have to force yourself. And whether it's like, okay, I don't want to paint, but I'm going to go and buy all the supplies today because that's not painting, but it's something I have to do. So every minute of my day, I want to try and do something towards the goal of creating. And then once I'm painting and everything's set up, if you want to know specifics, like my morning is spent having a delicious coffee and listening to some nice music and researching. So I'll be on Twitter and be, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. And that takes you down a rabbit hole. Or I'll look at inspiration, like, oh, I'm going to look up Art Deco buildings in New York. And I'll spend the morning looking at that. And then I'll tag certain elements that I like to. So I have a file on my computer that has all my inspiration. So when I do sit down at the drawing table, it's all there on my computer and I can reference it anytime. Then I'll get to work and paint probably when I'm working on a show 5 to 8 hours a day. Like
Wow.
that's full on painting. Yep. And it's not like constant factory assembly line. It's more like I'm gonna paint solid for 3 hours, put on a cool music track, and just have fun and paint. It's like, oh, it's lunchtime, have some lunch. Then I'll like, I don't know, go on and fix up my website. Oh, I have to announce the show. And I gotta go on Photoshop and put it, and it's like, oh, okay, now I'll go back to painting. So it's not like intense painting every minute of the day. It's a carousel of art related stuff, if that makes any
Oh
sense.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I feel like the reality of the 21st century artist is more or less what you just said, a carousel of art related stuff. I mean,
Yep.
at least in music, we're sort of required to be, experts in video and experts in personal branding and sales. And, I guess as one of the other things that impresses me about you is the clear focus that you pay to the industrial side of what it is you're doing. I mean, I always love artists that look like they're in it to win it, and that it inspires me because somebody like you who embodies such an extraordinary uniqueness has found a way to exist in this peculiar life just by virtue of being you. And I get very excited about stuff like that because I'm living a similar life insofar as
Yes.
I don't know exactly how I would fit into this world if I didn't fit in
Me
my own
neither.
particular way.
Yep.
So how lucky and blessed. And I would even say that, when I reached out to you over a year ago, I was at the bottom of I was at the bottom of a spiritual pit. And I could sense that you were thinking in ways to me that were quite similar. And in some ways, reaching out to you, it was amazing to have it confirmed that yes, indeed, that voice on Twitter is connected to a very authentic person. It's obvious listening to you talk just how authentic a person you really are, and that you are in this life in the kind of way where you're digging deep and you are having a relationship with gratitude and with artfulness and with output that is unique and reverent, and you place an importance on the spirit of who you are being imbued into the work you create. And even I would say your Twitter account is an artful output of you, and it's authentic. Once we
Correct.
started to talk, I was like, this guy is exactly who I think he was, and it's because you present yourself accurately. There's nothing has been fudged
No.
when it comes to Andrew King. I mean, which is crazy because in some ways the artifice within art is expected, and then to find somebody, I don't know if there is, like, I don't feel like there was a layer that I needed to peel off with Andrew King in order to get to the real guy.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. And Twitter, can we call it that, or is it X? Whatever. We'll call it Twitter. I always call it that.
So do I.
But Twitter is an extension, I think, of your personal self. And I've, I guess it's a commentary on society. When I found Twitter, it got very dark. It became a dark place.
Yep.
And that was during COVID. Everyone was at everyone's throats and calling each other names and blah, 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 blah. And you fall into that trap yourself because you you have emotions and feelings that you think are right. And I guess deep down, what I'm trying to do is I think this feels right. And I want to help other people realize that if you're thinking like I'm thinking, it's okay. Because I'm going to say it. I'm self employed. You work somewhere where you can't say that because you will be labeled, judged, whatever. And I'm trying to share things, especially during COVID. I found it very dark, and I wanted to make people realize the world is actually pretty cool. And there's all these neat things. So if you remember, I tried to take us back to the time when things were fun and good. And to me, that was the 80s.
Yep.
And I think we're in the same age bracket where we grew up in a time where we had a lot of fun. There were no phones. We had our computers, which were Ataris or ColecoVision, or if you had Intellivision, whatever. But that was it. You'd play some games, but then your buddies would show up on bikes. Hey,
Yep.
we're going to build a fort in the woods or whatever. And you would go out and play and have fun, and you would go collect bottles out of a ditch. And it was a life experience that was, for me, a happy time. And I know the 80s probably weren't a happy time for a lot of people. That's fine. Everyone goes through life differently. But for me, that was my personal favorite happy time. So I was trying to share, like, hey, remember when we did this? Remember this movie? Remember that? Blah, blah. And then everyone could, as a collective, share in that happiness. And I think that's the gold in the pit of Twitter, is that you can share common uh, joys in life, as well as the dark side and the evil that humanity has. But yeah, what you see on Twitter is pretty much me as a person. There are things I can't say, which I'd love to say, because I'm also trying to sell art. And if I say something and somebody doesn't agree with it, I've lost, I don't know, 1,000 customers because they don't like what I agree with. So there's a fine balance, as it should be in life. Like, there are things you shouldn't say out loud. Keep that to yourself. And that's Twitter. There's a lot of people that just say whatever they want. It's like, maybe keep that to yourself and scream at your partner or whatever about it. Poor Allie, she has to deal with me as I'm yelling about stuff, but I don't yell it on Twitter. And anyway, for me, there's enough to end that point. There's enough crazy, evil stuff going on in the world. We don't need more of it on Twitter. So I try and make it a positive experience. And sure as hell, I'll complain about something, but that in the end is to raise awareness for an issue. For example, we go back to that Talisman Hotel. Like, your listeners probably don't know the whole story, but it was a mid-century modern motel called the Talisman Motel, and it was designed by Bill Tarrin, this famous Ottawa architect. Beautiful example of mid-century architecture that you'd see in like Palm Springs. And a developer purchased it and demolished it, but they were told to save one pavilion of it as a heritage element, and then they just tore it down anyway. And that's like, come on, guys. And that pissed me off. And because I'm a fan of that stuff's gone forever. Once it's gone, and the developer said, "Oh, we're gonna rebuild it in the image of what it." No, it's not. You're gonna have like, it's not going to look the same. It'll be a Disneyland reproduction of it. It's not using the same materials. It doesn't have the same kind of footprint in the community because they're going to build it somewhere else. And you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's a package deal when you have a heritage building. And for them to demolish it, it wasn't just the act of demolishing. It was the going against the community for their own interests. That pissed me off.
Mm.
Anyway, stuff like that pissed me off. So that brings out the dark side.
On your Twitter, you discuss 80s nostalgia, a lot of Eastern Ontario and Ottawa lore and history. And then you have a Wednesday, a Whiskey Wednesday,
Right.
where you sort of get into all things esoteric, which you're one of the people who outs themselves with a fascination for this stuff. I am reluctant to out myself because of all of the myriad horrible labels attached to,
Exactly. Yeah.
for people who think for themselves. There are days where the general public doesn't want to hear about what you're thinking about.
No.
But you're putting it out there in a way that I find it very rich and exciting and thoughtful. I want to just also quickly preamble a little bit about this fascination you and I have about being witness to the nostalgia coming from the late 20th century. There was a point in the last couple of records where it's like, man, am I going to turn into this guy who only writes these nostalgic laments about the 1980s? And I kind of feel like spiritually, you and I will be the last witness to a more or less analog world that was, the way we were taught, 2,500 years of analog living on this planet as per the human design.
Mhm.
And you and I would have developed pre-internet. We would have developed in the cradle of the instincts of the 20th century. We didn't see modernity coming in the way that it would show up today. Back then, our modernity was envisaged through Star Wars, through hair bands and synthesizer music, and the promised future that was kind of that the 1980s was marinating in, a sense that AstroTurf and Astro Boy and Astro Pops and the
Mhm.
Astrodome, like that these sort of fantastical visions of the future that we were sort of calling now were a funny preamble to a future that would roll around not too far after that and
Mhm.
totally upend the analog version of humanity. Um, so that's my preamble about you and I as these sort of like faithful servants to 20th century nostalgia, late 20th century nostalgia. Now I want to fast forward to your Whiskey Wednesday and your look into the
Mhm.
esoteric. Because the other
Okay.
thing, like I said, when I look at Andrew King, I can't figure out how you embody so much knowledge, how you are able to stay so passionate about so many things and seemingly have an effortless connection, knowledge. It's like you have an inner encyclopedia about a lot of things. I feel like I'm juggling and am out of breath a lot of times just trying to keep ahead of the stuff I'm interested in, yet you seem to be mastering it. Of course, this is from me from the outside. So,
Yeah, well, thank you. By no means mastering. What it is a to just rewind about Whiskey Wednesday. Thank you for tuning in. It's not for everyone. And I used to spout that stuff out all the time, daily or whatever, every few days. And I'm like, wait a sec, this isn't for everyone. Like, why? No one. So I decided to compress it into one a time slot per week where if you want to tune into this stuff, go for it. If you don't, great. And tune in. I'm happy to share, but I felt it necessary to put it into a package on one day a week. And that's where you can unfollow, mute, whatever. I don't care. I'm talking about this stuff because I think humanity needs to know certain elements of this world are being hidden from you, they're being contained. And to the best of my knowledge, I've written books about local history, and to do that, I have to research and look into things. It's like, hey, oh, okay. And I go down these rabbit holes. And in doing that, I uncover things that maybe we should know about that no one really wants to talk about. But also, how do I package this? And I have to say, it's never pre programmed, it's never done ahead of time, and it just auto feeds on it. Every Whiskey Wednesday is done live from my couch over there with either a glass of whiskey, and if I'm out of whiskey, it'll be a glass of wine or whatever. It's just my one day a week to decompress and talk about stuff like we're sitting around a campfire. And I find actually that's a good analogy. Campfires bring people together and bring out topics. Why do we always talk about ghost stories at a campfire?
yeah.
Right? You're not going to be in a grocery store and talk about ghosts. It's always around a campfire. And so that's the goal of Whiskey Wednesday. It's a campfire talk about weird stuff that we should talk about because, like ghosts, there's stuff going on that we can't explain. And so I try and get to the root of it and have credible sources like, or I could say UFOs are a thing. And I'm like, well, how do I back that up? Well, I find out CIA documents are revealing there were these programs, and Ottawa being the capital with the NRC, they had programs going on. So find credible sources to back up what I'm saying. So you can't go, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, actually, it's a conspiracy only because you don't know the truth. And once the truth is known, it's no longer a conspiracy, it's a fact. And I am very happy to know people follow and listen like yourself. But what's hilarious is the direct messages that I get that they don't publicly admit that they love it or find it interesting. They have to do it privately because, like you said, they don't want to make it known that they are interested in this. I give zero, what's because I'm self employed. You don't like what I'm saying, that's fine. And I try and keep it very PG. I'm not swearing and calling people names, but this is information you should know about if you have questions. And there's a lot of questions I think people have about our current state of affairs. And 20 years ago in the 80s, to get back to that, sorry, this is another carousel, but to get back to the 80s, we were living in a kind of utopia of, hey man, we were living in the moment. Wait a sec, I'm gonna take this Coke bottle and get 25 cents and get 25 cents of candy. Wow, this is awesome. This is capitalism for kids. And your hard work provided stuff, but you were in a world that was protected without knowledge. So as a kid, you didn't have the knowledge to look up aliens or UFOs or anything. We are now, so despite its negative aspects, we're in a world where I can look up something and within seconds get to a CIA document. I could never do that in the 80s. But the 80s created a generation, Gen X, of people that don't put up with BS. We had to, like, hey, you want to buy a comic book, you got to find a bunch of ditch bottles to buy that comic. Whereas nowadays we're in a instant gratification world, and I think that's what differs our generation from other generations is that, hey, our parents weren't home. Okay, so now I go for a walk every day, and a school bus drops the kids off, and all the parents are waiting for the kids to escort them home. It's like, what? When we were kids, here comes the grandpa moment. When we were kids, we would get on our bikes and bike home. Like, so, and that was the fun of that generation was the adventure, getting home with your friends, and you'd like, hey, you want to go in the woods and build a fort? Yeah. And then you'd like scavenge material and build a fort. And then before you knew it, oh no, the sun's going down. We should get home. But it didn't matter because our parents were at work until 5 or 6, and there'd be no one at home. So why not have fun? Now it just seems, and I'm not every kid's like that, but I'm sad for many kids that don't experience that sense of independence with no parents around. I can probably speak for many people. Your first intro to naked bodies was finding some ditch porn in a culvert from 1970, a Playboy scrap, and you're like, oh, and then you'd put that in your fort. So there's all these experiences that I don't know the kids will have today.
Yeah. I mean, so going back to the Whiskey Wednesday idea and this idea that you're putting things out there that people are DMing you and saying, hey, like I quietly agree and I'm grateful for the things you're saying. And like you said, Twitter got very dark over the pandemic. It really, I unplugged from Twitter and had to like leave my enjoyment of looking at your Twitters and a few others just because I found that it started to get so dark that it was affecting my ability to be happy in the day. And just by virtue of unplugging from Twitter for a year allowed me to just kind of rebalance myself, dump a bunch of accounts that I don't need to see, and then kind of use Twitter for what it is still good for. What I'd like to talk about, because I'm thinking a lot about how divided we've been made to be at, and you know, you and I are in the business of ideas. I'm going to sort of work. This is a roundabout way of getting to a point here. I'm not afraid of ideas. I'm not really afraid of words. I'm in the business of words as well. And so when complicated or esoteric or, you know, strange ideas are presented, true or not, I'm happy to let my mind play with those things. And I'm not afraid that they're going to take me over, that they're going to somehow change the thrust of my ideological bent. Ideas to me are exciting, fun. I have them all the time. I play with them all the time. I even make money from my own ideas. So that establishes that guys like you and I, we're not too afraid of ideas. So when some of these esoteric ideas, or what could be sort of construed as conspiracy, which is, it's an unfortunate pejorative. I'm just not offended by this stuff. Now, when I float ideas to friends who are untested around these things, and then I get almost, it's almost like they've got a demon living protecting their belief system. And when I prick at it with even a name that has been demonized in the
Mhm.
media, or a
Mhm.
concept that's been demonized in the
Mhm.
media, and then I'll see this demon sort of rise to protect the belief system. I call it a demon only because I have friends who, at the mere mention of a certain thing, very
Right.
hateful stuff starts to
Yep.
blast out of their face. And I'm like, wow, that's
Correct.
crazy that a name or a concept or an idea has changed the temperature in the room where you can no longer maintain your composure. Like it's so
Correct.
it skews you so hard to have to consider a new idea or a concept that it feels to me that I can only classify that entity that protects the belief system as demonic, because these are good humans and trustworthy people, people who I've known for many
Yes.
years. But at the mere mention of something that may have an ideological bent that we've been told you can't go there, the mere mention of it brings out this demon to protect this belief system. So I've been thinking a lot in the postlude of the pandemic and as we were in the pandemic about the protection of belief systems, how important they are to us, and how our ego in many ways is predicated on the protection of a belief system. And I feel that in some ways when a belief system is challenged, our ego shows up because, firstly, the laziness of humans is I would really like to not have to replace something I've already learned with a new thing that I've learned. There's been new
Correct.
information and oh shit, now I have to remove the old information and replace it with new information. Humans don't really want to do that. And then I think that if there is something coming at you that feels ideologically dangerous or untoward, like I said, this sort of demon rises, and I think that demon is your ego. And I think your ego
Mhm.
doesn't want to have to reckon with, geez, been caught with my pants down, possibly believing something that isn't true. I feel
Right.
foolish. Whatever it is, that the protection of pride around this. I mean, as humans, our ego does a lot of damage to our society, it does a lot of damage to our personal relationships. This is how I've been thinking about this stuff because I can't figure out why ideas and words bring the worst out of people that they do when I'm so fascinated by ideas and words
Okay.
and the spirit of the unique individual that I get excited by new ideas,
Correct.
excited by the potential that I could change my belief system to accommodate a newer, bigger, possibly more exciting life idea. So with that long preamble, I'm going to hand it over to you. Is what I'm saying?
100. If this was a dartboard, there is a dart going right into the bullseye. Boom. So, to reflect on that, I can sum it up with one word: fear.
Yeah.
People, humans have an innate fear of the unknown. When you go into a dark room, you're afraid, you don't know what's in the dark. And it's that fear of the unknown that makes people very uneasy and uncomfortable because they don't like the feeling of being, they, like you said, people love to be in a protective bubble of their own thoughts and their own ideas and their own paradigm of how they go through life. And if you start to insert things that disrupt their protective force field, they get scared because that upends everything they've learned, everything they've done in life. And a lot of people, not everyone, you and I are in a very fortunate position. And I'm not going to say it's luck, it's because we had a predisposition to create and carve out our own path in life. Many people, again, are fearful of going out on a limb and doing your own thing. So many people, and it's not, and you can't fault these people because we live in a society of indoctrination. From the moment you enter kindergarten, you are told to color within the lines and you get a gold sticker. Well, I don't want to color in your lines. I don't want to color the stupid duck. I want to draw my own duck. And I would flip the paper over and I would draw my own duck or draw a spaceship and I would get an F. You got an F. It's like, well, I don't care. But people are fearful of what other people think as well. So you are indoctrinated all through grade school, all through high school to follow what you are told in order to get a gold star or a diploma. And you and I had to go through the hoops to graduate and do, but as soon as we're out of that indoctrination system, It's like, see you later. I'm doing my own thing now. And a lot of people love the safety net and the feeling of comfort of getting a gold star. It made them feel good. And then they love the comfort of being told what to do at a certain time of day. They get a job, clocking in at 9 a.m. They're given, a manager gives them a thing to do, and they do that until 5 p.m. And then they get a paycheck and they go home. They do this and they repeat and repeat and repeat until they're dead because they're fearful of anything else. It's all they've known all their lives. So, to go back to the idea thing, I'm going to generalize here, and I bet a lot of these people that are afraid to look at new ideas live in a very sheltered 9 to 5 kind of envelope of reality. But there are some people that are like, wait a second, all my life I've lived a lie. Maybe these ideas, and they become, and I hate using the cliche of awaken, I have an awakening, because they realize their entire life was not so much a huge lie, but it was a fabricated reality that they followed along. And to know that they were lied to all that time, that's scary. That is very scary for people to realize that, holy crap, I just lived a life that wasn't what I thought it was because I was told to. And then, it, like you said, it goes back to the ego. And to admit fault, in humans have this weird thing where they don't want to admit they're wrong. Every human is wrong. And one of the greatest abilities as a human is to admit you were wrong. I fucked up. I screwed up. Sorry. My fault. How can I fix this? Or whatever. But a lot of people see that as a weakness to admit fault. But they don't realize every strong human has to admit their mistake and learn from it, and that makes them stronger. But to admit you were wrong about something cracks their ego, and they don't like that because it goes back to how they are perceived. I don't want to be perceived that I was wrong, so I'm just going to say I'm right and you're wrong. No, I don't want to hear that. I'm right, you're wrong. Instead, we should be open to these ideas, not to say just completely shed your force field, but let it open up a little bit and go, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Interesting. Thank you for enlightening me on that. I don't agree with it, but I find that interesting. And it's so unfortunate that there's this great wall of China around people that is impenetrable by new ideas. But all the greatest inventions in humanity are from people that challenged what they were told and created and had an imagination and thought outside the box. Look at how explorers explored. People in authority. The world is flat. If you sail across that ocean, you're going to fall off the earth and die. And that was fear. It's like, oh, okay, I won't sail away. But there's that one dude who's like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to fall off the face of the earth. I'm going to build a ship and I'm going to sail and find out on my own. And it's always those people that are the greatest explorers, the greatest scientists, the greatest artists, or whatever, that challenge what they've been told. And that sets off a whole new chain of events. So what if that dude with the boat didn't come to North America? That Norse guy in 1000 AD didn't build a ship and come over and land in Newfoundland and go, holy crap, there's a whole continent over here. And then he went back and he told his people, yeah, if you go over here and sail over here, there's tons of wood and animals we can hunt. Oh, really? And then that brought the whole exploration from the Spanish, French, and that's how North America became North America, because they challenged what they were told, and here we are.
This idea of being challenged what you're told. So I went through the Ontario school system when there was a grade 13, and I was on track to be one of those academic
OAC.
OAC
Yeah.
kid, absolutely. Now I I kind of started to fail out of high school. I joke that I'm a high school dropout. I'm not a dropout. I didn't get my OAC. I just got my grade 12, which back in the day, that felt like a whoa, like if you were on track for OAC and you didn't get it. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. What I want to get to is I was really lucky. I had a lot of very good teachers through public school and high school who identified me as, oh, that's a unique kid. He's a good kid. He's not an asshole. And he seems to show initiative. And in some ways, I was cut some slack by some teachers that gave me a sense that I was allowed to trust that inner thing that was happening in me. I was allowed to summon up that individuality and play with it and even practice at it a little bit. I'm just curious, where along the line when you were a kid were you given the wink wink nudge nudge, you're onto the right thing? Like, who gave you a sense of responsibility to yourself or confidence in yourself that you should chase this thing that's in you? You are an individual worth sort of you have an individual voice worth hearing. Were there people along the line that set you up for that? Okay, I'm interested to hear about these people.
So that's awesome. You had that kind of educational diversion where they helped you explore other avenues that weren't in the school system. For me, I never had that. It was like, do what you're told, do this, do that. So I guess it was in Carleton where Jacques Ostigi, that designer, he's like, listen, you're a good artist, and I don't think you should be designing filing cabinets. I'm like, yeah, I agree. I don't want to do this. But I'm like, well, what am I going to do? So all through high school, I had my own comic strip that I would self-publish and sell for 25 cents to all the kids in high school. It was like a mad magazine.
Yeah.
And so I'd like characterize certain teachers and whatever, and people loved it because I was making fun of certain teachers in a satirical way. And where am I going with this? Okay, we're gonna rewind to that comic strip, and because I did that, there came the time where I had to graduate high school, and I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to get out of there. Just simply because I never felt I could do what I wanted to do. But that comic strip, I was doing what I wanted to do. And because of that comic strip, it came the time where we had to graduate, and there was a valedictorian. There's always the valedictorian speech for the high school. And it was at our high school by voting. So you vote for who you want to be the valedictorian. And most often it would go to like the quarterback of the football team or the guy that super smart and gets 100%. And unbeknownst to me, the entire school voted for me to be the valedictorian because they were like, he's the one guy that will get up and speak the truth about this high school because they've been following my comic strip this whole time. Let's do this. But the principal was like, you were only voted in here because you're going to make fun during the valedictorian speech. I need to see a copy of your speech before you present it. And I approve it before you get up there. And I'm like, no problem. And okay. Will I ever be back here? No. So as a final farewell, I made 2 speeches, one to give to the principal to read over. And it was everything that you would want to have in a good old valedictorian speech. And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, good. And I'm like, thank you. And then the graduation day comes up, and I have an entirely different speech. And all the parents and the entire high school's up there. And I turned it into what the people wanted to hear because they voted for me. They didn't vote for me to go up there and say, this is the best days of your life and blah, blah, blah. And so I went up there and I gave them what they voted for, into the shock and horror of the staff of the school as I put on a comedy routine, doing impersonations or whatever. These poor kids, went through 5 years of high school. They want to have something fun, not a boring speech. So, but I remember, I'll never forget looking down at the principal, just beet red, glaring at me for not doing what I was told. And it's probably the only time in my life I did an actual physical mic drop, like, and walked off the stage. Like, it was like, oh, standing ovation. And that made me realize, like, you know what? Now I can do what I want as long as it's making people happy. Like, now we fast forward to industrial design in the filing cabinets. I realized I like doing cartoons. So the Ottawa Citizen at the time, they were like looking for a Sunday comics artist. And I submitted some comics, and they picked my comic strip to be in the Sunday paper. So every Sunday I now had a regular comic. I was getting paid for it. It was really fun. And it was the editor of the comics page, Deborah Richmond, God bless her, wherever she is. And she's like, you know what? You have a passion for comics. You should go into animation. And I'm like, really? What's that? Oh, there's an animation school in Ottawa at Algonquin. And I had no idea. So I went into animation, had the best time of my life, graduated, got a job in television animation, absolute best time of my life. So it wasn't a teacher, it was just a random person who opened me up to an avenue I had no idea existed, all because it traced back to that comic strip in high school.
But also, you had a very positive feedback to telling the truth, and with your
Mhm.
valedictory address. And I mean, to stand up there knowing that you were going to piss the principal off, like, it's very fascinating. It's a very fascinating experiment. I was too interested in pleasing the teachers. The way I was able to execute some of my rebellion was by staying friendly with the teachers,
Mm.
being the good kid, and allowing,
Right.
by virtue of being the good kid, I had access to accommodations. So you,
Mm.
by virtue of your courage and tenacity, you put this thing out. The whole school goes, yeah, that's exactly what we wanted to hear. And you're left with this thought that, I mean, I'm going to boil it down and crystallize
Mm-hmm.
it in that, heck, when I am myself and I let my eyes and ears inform what it is I believe. And if I put what I believe out there as a true and authentic, how you truly and authentically see the world, like, the response cannot be denied. We're living in a fairly junky culture where there's not much
Mm-hmm.
authenticity out there. I think humans can still tell that stuff. So for you, you put something authentic out. A room full of people responded, a handful of them, if they were the teachers, negatively, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have been some sort of affirmation like, holy shit, what I just did was very powerful.
Yeah, and we live in a world of social media now, and people goes back to fear. They're fearful of what other people think, and COVID showed that a lot. And people, social media, they put out what they think will be popular. Like, these influencers drive me bananas, being fake. They're, oh, look at me having this great dinner out, and I'm wearing this great outfit. Really, it's so phony. Like, but then there are really genuine people, but for some reason they don't get the same accolades as the fake people. And I think it's the whole, to generalize, the whole Kardashian culture of like, I just want to get home from work and watch and live vicariously through other people. So we've become so dissatisfied in our own life that we have to live vicariously through fake people putting on a fake happy life. uh and that's very sad. People should just, hey, I would rather follow somebody on Instagram that eats a burger and finds a hair in it and is like, what the, you know what I mean? Like, that's authentic. Or be like, wow, this is the best burger, and it's some shack somewhere, and it's not like the perfect photo. Anyway, So there is value in authenticity, and humans can see through it, except people lead very busy lives.
Yeah.
We've become a slave culture where we're so tired at the end of the day. I just want to watch something nice. And there's the nicely dressed lady taking a picture of a nice plate of who knows what, and oh, that's nice, somebody's having fun. Oh well, not me. But that creates a cycle of depression, because then people think, well, why am I not like that? And that makes them sad. When screw that, that's fake. Just realize it's fake and go out and have fun and do your own thing. And anyway, I could go on and on about social media. It is a blessing and a curse. It's, for me, been great spreading the word about my artwork and history and informing people, which I think it should be used for. But then there's the whole monetization. So I have no subscription service. I have no like Patreon or any of these things. This is all 100% free material. Take it or leave it. I'm not charging you for it. And that allows me the freedom of doing whatever the hell I want and saying what I want, because there's no subscription base. The only thing I have to be mindful of is, hey, I got to sell some paintings. And that's about it.
Andrew King, you are as fascinating as I thought you were going to be. I'm so grateful for this chat. I feel like it's just the beginning. I think we got to talk more. I have a sense that we're going to hear a response that, yes, indeed, there will be a chorus of people that say, we need to hear more from Andrew King. So I hope you'll come on again.
Oh my God, my pleasure. Yeah. And sorry about the lighting. Next time I'm going to have a fancy setup like you do, Hawksley.
Okay. That is guaranteed that we're going to have to do this again, because we're going to want to see the new fancy setup. But the thoughts and energy coming off of you, Andrew, I believe you are a very special creature. I am grateful that you're in my life. I'm grateful that I've been able to have this discussion that I'll be able to disseminate into the world through the ears of people that I've been able to sort of, people who sort of trust the things I put out. And you're the kind of human that the world needs to be reminded exists, because I think there's a goodness in you. And I think, as you've already mentioned, your Socratic belief that, you're a stumbler and a mistake maker, just like all the rest of us, but you are making interesting and new mistakes. And I like to hear about what you're looking at and the things you're thinking about. And this chat has definitely been a blessing, and I'm very grateful for it. So thank you once again.
Well, my pleasure. And thanks for having me. You're a sandbox friend, so anytime you want to re-enter the sandbox, let's hang out.
Will do. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, thanks, Hawksley. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
The Stumble Forward is an Isadora Media production and is hosted by Hawksley Workman and produced by Jennifer Kavanaugh. Be sure to subscribe and follow The Stumble Forward. You can support the podcast at patreon.com/Hawksley Workman. Thank you for listening.
Stumble forward, stumble forward. The stumble forward, stumble forward. The stumble forward. Do forward. The stumble forward, stumble forward. The stumble.